At 0200 on the morning of June 6, 1944, a British commando lay face down in a drainage ditch in northern France. The mud was freezing, soaking through his denim smock and numbing his chest, but he didn't move or shiver. He just watched the German sentry standing 50 yards away, a bored man leaning against a concrete post and smoking a cigarette. The orange cherry of the tobacco glowed in the dark, serving as a tiny beacon that marked the difference between life and death for the entire 12-man team hiding in the grass. The commando team had a job to do: infiltrate a radar station, plant explosives, and disappear before the sun came up. It was a classic hit and run, but to hit the target, they first had to get past the gatekeeper. The sentry wasn't alone. Just inside the guard shack 10 feet away was a barracks building filled with sleeping German soldiers with windows open to the summer breeze. If the sentry shouted, dropped his rifle, or if the commandos fired a single shot from a standard weapon, the entire base would wake up and turn the drainage ditch into a grave. The commando looked at his weapons, knowing the Sten gun slung across his chest was a cheap, rattling piece of metal that sprayed 9mm bullets like firecrackers, spitting flame and noise heard for a mile. He had a Lee-Enfield rifle that was accurate but sounded like a cannon, creating a crack that would echo off every building in the compound. He looked at his boot where the famous Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knife was tucked, silent and deadly, but to use it, he would have to crawl 50 yards across gravel that crunched like breakfast cereal. He would have to get within breathing distance of a man who was already on edge, and if the sentry turned around at the wrong second or a twig snapped, the mission was over. The commando was trapped in the noise gap, too far away to use a knife but too close to use a gun. This was the problem that had plagued the British Special Operations Executive for years, as nobody had figured out how to kill a man quietly from a safe distance in a war built on heavy artillery. But tonight, the commando was holding something different lying in the mud next to him, not a rifle or a submachine gun, but a monstrosity that looked like a piece of junk welded together in a plumber's garage. It had the wooden stock of an old World War I rifle, a short, stubby barrel like a gangster's Tommy gun, and sticking out of the front was a massive, thick metal tube as wide as a baseball bat. It was the Delisle Commando carbine, and to the average soldier, it looked ridiculous, like a toy. When the commandos first saw it in the training camps back in Scotland, they had laughed and called it the Drainpipe, asking the armorer if he had run out of real guns and started building weapons out of scrap metal. The mockery was understandable because the Delisle didn't look like a weapon of war, it looked like a Frankenstein experiment. It was a bolt-action gun in 1944, meaning you had to manually pull a handle back to load every single bullet while everyone else used semi-automatic rifles, making it feel obsolete. And then there was the ammunition. The Delisle didn't fire powerful 303 rifle rounds that could punch through a brick wall. It fired .45 caliber pistol bullets, the same fat, slow slugs used in the American Colt handgun. The soldiers looked at the heavy bullets and scoffed, saying it had the range of a thrown rock, and that if you shot a German at 100 yards, he would probably just catch the bullet. The experts in the regular army agreed, hating the Delisle because it required special magazines and parts, weighing over 8 pounds for a gun that was basically a glorified pistol. They argued it was a waste of resources and said stealth was about training, not gadgets, telling the commandos to just learn to crawl better. The hatred went deeper than mechanics. It was cultural because soldiers are trained to trust the loud bang and kick of a rifle that signifies power. The Delisle felt dead in your hands, silent and weak, like a toy gun given to a child. So the Delisle became a joke, the fantasy gun for dreamers that got left in the truck while men grabbed their trusty Lee-Enfields. But the man in the ditch wasn't an expert. He was a killer who knew that in the dark, power and speed don't matter, only confusion matters. If you kill a man with a loud gun, his friends know exactly where you are and return fire instantly. But if you kill a man with silence, they don't know anything and stay asleep. The commando shifted his weight as the mud sucked at his elbows, looking at the ugly, heavy Frankenstein of mismatched parts lying on the grass. The sentry flicked his cigarette ash onto the concrete and turned his head, looking right over the spot where the commando was hiding. The commando froze with his heart hammering, knowing that if the sentry saw him, the German would shout alarm, and the night would explode into a bloodbath. He reached out and wrapped his hand around the familiar wooden stock of the Delisle, feeling the back half of a standard Lee-Enfield, but the front half was alien. He slid his left hand forward to grip the massive, cold silencer tube that felt like industrial pipe, lifting the heavy, front-heavy weapon to his shoulder. He peered through the simple iron sights, lining them up on the sentry's head, which was just a gray blob against a black background at 50 yards. The doubt crept back in as he remembered the mockery, wondering if the bullet would reach the target or if the gun would jam. But then he remembered the demonstration by Godfrey Delisle and pushed the doubt away, settling his cheek against the wood. He wasn't relying on the army or the experts anymore. He was betting his life on a gun that looked like it had been built by a madman. He tightened his finger on the trigger, not going to storm the gate or fight a battle, but going to commit a murder with the one weapon the world said was a joke. To understand why the commando in the ditch was holding such a strange-looking weapon, you have to leave the freezing mud of northern France and go back to a quiet garden shed in London, where the Delisle carbine was born. It wasn't designed in a high-tech military laboratory, but by William Godfrey Delisle, a civilian tinkerer who looked more like a schoolteacher. While big factories churned out millions of standard rifles, he was thinking about the noise gap in the British arsenal, realizing they had no way to touch someone at 50 yards without waking up the neighborhood. The problem wasn't just putting a muffler on a gun. The problem was physics, because a normal rifle makes two noises: the explosion of gunpowder and the crack of the bullet breaking the sound barrier. A standard British Lee-Enfield bullet flies at over 2,400 feet per second, creating a sonic boom that sounds like a whip crack, which no metal tubing can stop. Godfrey Delisle realized that to make a truly silent gun, he needed a bullet that was fat, heavy, and lazy, one that refused to break the speed limit. He looked at the American Thompson submachine gun, which fired a .45 caliber pistol round, a chunk of lead that traveled slowly at under 900 feet per second, making it naturally subsonic. This was the MacGyver moment, where Delisle decided to combine the silence of the American pistol round with the accuracy of a British rifle. Without a factory, he started hacking things apart in his workshop, taking a standard British Lee-Enfield rifle, unscrewing the barrel, and forcing a barrel from a Thompson submachine gun onto the receiver. He then figured out how to feed the stubby American bullets into the British action by cutting a hole in the bottom of the rifle and welding a Colt 1911 pistol magazine housing in place. It looked terrible, like three different guns had crashed into each other, featuring a sniper rifle stock, a bolt gun action, a machine gun barrel, and a pistol magazine. But the real magic was the drainpipe suppressor, a massive tube 2 inches wide covering the entire length of the barrel, looking exactly like industrial plumbing. Inside, Delisle drilled holes in the gun barrel so gas would bleed into the tube, taking the pressure off before the bullet left the gun. He added baffles, metal spirals that acted like a maze for the remaining gas, cooling it down so it would seep out with a gentle hiss instead of a bang. It was a brilliant piece of engineering that was ugly as sin, and when Delisle presented it to the military, the officers were skeptical of the heavy, clunky toy. Delisle didn't argue. He took the gun to the street outside the military offices, aimed at a pigeon on the roof, and pulled the trigger. The pigeon fell, but the other pigeons didn't fly away because they didn't hear a thing, and he cleared the roof before anyone realized he was firing. The officers were stunned to realize the loudest part of the gun was the mechanical click-clack of the metal bolt, which was quieter than a person coughing. The skepticism vanished, and the toy became a top-secret priority with a small production run of 129 weapons delivered to the Commandos. Which brings us back to the drainage ditch in France, where the commando holding the Delisle watched the German sentry turning back toward the guard shack. The sentry had finished his cigarette and was about to walk inside, which would ruin the chance for a clean kill. The commando settled the iron sights on the sentry's chest, remembering the instructor's warning to aim high, because the heavy .45 caliber slug dropped like a stone at 50 yards. He raised the barrel slightly to aim for the throat, fighting the doubt that crept back in about the bolt-action gun. He had one shot, and if he missed, working the bolt would make a loud clack-clack that would alert the guard, leaving no second chances. He took up the slack on the trigger, felt the breaking point, and squeezed. There was no kick or flash, just a gentle nudge against his shoulder and a sound that was a wet thud, like dropping a book on a carpet, accompanied by the faint hiss of gas. The commando watched the slow-moving bullet cover the 50 yards in a fraction of a second, and the sentry didn't hear a thing until the impact. The bullet hit him squarely below the neck with the force of a sledgehammer, dumping all its energy into the target and knocking him backward as if kicked by a horse. The air was driven out of his lungs, preventing him from screaming as he crumpled to the concrete with a soft thud. The commando waited, holding his breath as 5 seconds turned into 10, watching the barracks windows 10 feet away. Nothing happened, the barracks remained dark, and the snoring of the German soldiers continued uninterrupted. The toy had worked, punching a hole in the enemy defenses without breaking the silence. The commando signaled his team, and the 12 men rose like ghosts, moving quickly across the open ground and stepping over the body of the sentry to reach the radar control room. But as they moved deeper into the compound, they saw a nightmare scenario. A half-track vehicle parked in the shadow with a second sentry manning a heavy machine gun, and a German shepherd lying next to it that was waking up. The toy had gotten them through the front door, but now inside the fortress, silence wasn't enough anymore. The commando team was frozen in the shadows of the main radar building, facing a nightmare scenario with an alert gunner on a half-track and a waking German shepherd. The dog was the real problem because it was a biological alarm system. If it barked once, every German in the barracks would wake up and destroy the element of surprise. The commando with the delisle carbine knew he had to act fast, shifting his aim from the man to the dog, squeezing the trigger as the animal opened its mouth to bark. The delisle coughed its soft, metallic sigh, and the heavy .45 caliber bullet struck the dog in the shoulder, dumping all its energy instantly and slamming the animal back into the dirt before a sound escaped its throat. Now came the hard part. The chamber was empty, and to take the next shot, the commando had to cycle the bolt, a fatal flaw of the delisle in a firefight. Slamming the bolt creates a distinct mechanical noise like a cymbal crash in the silence, so the commando had to reload in slow motion. He gripped the handle, lifting and pulling it back inch by inch to catch the hot brass casing before it hit the concrete, pocketing it to avoid the sound of a dropped coin. He slowly pushed the bolt forward, sliding a fresh bullet into the chamber and locking it down, knowing the gun was live again. He looked up at the dangerous gunner wearing headphones, knowing that if he shot him in the chest, the man might slump forward and depress the machine gun trigger, sending a catastrophic burst of fire into the night. The commando aimed at the gunner's shoulder to control the fall, knowing the heavy delisle slug pushed rather than just poked holes. He exhaled and fired, the gun making its strange muffled thud as the bullet hit with the force of a swinging sledgehammer. The violent impact lifted the man's upper body and threw him backward into the crew compartment, away from the triggers, erasing him from the board without a scream. The path was clear, and the team leader signaled the advance. The 12 men sprinted like ghosts across the open ground to the radar tower, placing explosive charges set for 10 minutes. But the mission wasn't over because they still had to pass the barracks building to escape. As they crept back toward the main gate, a door opened, and a German officer stepped out in his undershirt, holding a towel and freezing when he saw 12 British commandos standing in the yard. It was a high-noon duel, but with a difference. If the officer fired his Luger, the noise would alert the base, but if the commando fired the delisle, the noise would be nothing. The commando pointed the big drainpipe at the white undershirt and pulled the trigger, hitting the officer in the stomach and doubling him over silently. He cycled the bolt one last time and fired a final round into the back of the man's head to ensure no witness could crawl to an alarm, leaving the body illuminated by the yellow light. The team ran, slipping past the dead gate guard and crossing the drainage ditch into the tree line just as the explosives detonated half a mile away. The twin boom shook the ground, collapsing the radar tower and causing chaos at the base as German soldiers ran out screaming and firing flares at ghosts. When German investigators arrived the next morning, they were baffled to find the wrecked tower and 4 bodies shot with .45 caliber slugs, yet nobody in the sleeping barracks had heard a single shot. They wrote reports about phantom attackers, unable to understand how a powerful gun could kill without a bang, unaware that a tinkerer in London had cheated the laws of physics. Back on the extraction boat, the mood had changed. The men who had mocked the delisle watched the commando clean the ugly weapon with respect. One rifleman offered a cigarette as a peace offering, admitting the gun was ugly, to which the commando smiled and replied, "But it works." The toy had earned its stripes, proving that in the terrifying world of a raid, it was the most powerful weapon because it bought them time. The legend of the delisle spread, and the British High Command sent the few available weapons to dangerous theaters like Burma to hunt Japanese officers. British snipers in Burma used the delisle to ambush Japanese columns, dropping officers silently and causing panic among soldiers who fired wildly at shadows. The Japanese troops became terrified of the ghost gun, believing they were fighting spirits, which demoralized them and slowed their advance. The mockery was over, and the experts who had laughed at the plumbing parts fell silent, realizing that sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't the one that roars, but the one that whispers. When the commando team returned to England, the mood in the barracks had changed completely. The delisle carbine had transformed from a plumber's pipe joke into a respected tool that bought invisibility. The story of the raid spread through the special operations executive like wildfire, flooding supply officers, with requests from men begging to trade their Sten guns for the weapon they had once mocked. But there was a problem. Because the military experts had been skeptical, Ford Dagenham had built only 129 of them, making the delisle rarer than gold dust. Possessing one became a status symbol for the best of the best, like Jedburgh teams or Chindits, signifying they were doing the kind of work that didn't make the newspapers. The delisle wasn't just a status symbol, It was a ghost maker that continued to terrify the enemy in Germany and Southeast Asia. Reports from Burma describe Japanese patrols finding men dead with no explanation, no gunshot wounds, and no shell casings, leading to rumors of black magic or compressed air weapons. The psychological impact was massive because a weapon you can't hear is a nightmare that you can't take cover from. When the war ended in 1945, the toy had proven every critic wrong by silencing guard dogs, killing high-ranking officers, and saving countless British lives. Usually the army keeps successful weapons, but the delisle suffered a different fate because the British government was terrified of it falling into the wrong hands. They realized a silent, invisible killer would be a criminal's dream weapon in peacetime, so they ordered the guns to be destroyed. It was a tragedy of history, as crates of these hand-built masterpieces were shredded or dumped into the ocean, leaving only a handful that survived in museums or attics. Today, seeing a real delisle carbine is like seeing a unicorn, with collectors marveling at the rough welds and massive drainpipe suppressor that looks crude but remains effective. However, the spirit of the delisle didn't die in the crusher. The delisle principle of combining a heavy, subsonic bullet with an integrated suppressor became the blueprint for modern Special Forces weapons. The ghost of the delisle lives on in weapons like the Navy SEAL-S, MP5SD, and the Honey Badger rifle, which use the same concept of slowing bullets down to keep them quiet. The experts who mocked William Godfrey Delisle are gone, but his idea proved that you don't need to break the sound barrier to be lethal, and that the smartest way to fight is to be the one nobody notices. The legacy of the toy taught the military that stealth is about physics, understanding how sound works and how to defeat it. The commando in the ditch didn't care about the future of weapons design. He just knew he and his friends were alive because of that ugly metal tube. We rescue these stories to ensure that the genius of William Godfrey Delisle and the bravery of the men who carried his drainpipe don't disappear into silence, representing a moment where ingenuity triumphed over bureaucracy. If this deep dive into the world of silent warfare kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button to help us fight the algorithm and keep these gritty details of history alive. Subscribe for more microhistory that digs into the forgotten tools and tactics of World War II, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Here is the question I want to ask you guys. The soldiers hated the delisle at first because it didn't look or sound like a real gun, wanting the loud bang and heavy kick that made them feel powerful. But in a real life-or-death situation, would you trade that power for silence? Would you trust your life to a toy that made no noise, or would you stick with the weapon that roared? Drop a comment below and let me know. Is silence the ultimate weapon, or is firepower king? I read every comment. Thanks for watching, and thank you for helping us preserve the legacy of the silent carbine.